a fifth dimension, beyond that which is known to man.
Milwaukee's best.
It's a dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity.
Hey man, what about Milwaukee, man?
It is the middle ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition.
I think God would want us to go to Milwaukee.
And it lies between the pit of a man's fears and the summit of his knowledge.
What do you think about Milwaukee?
This is the dimension of imagination. You are now entering the Recombobulation area.
And welcome back to the Todd Allbaugh Show, featuring the Recombobulation area. Todd Michaels and that interview never gets old. It's one of the most fantastic things ever created in this company, in my opinion, and it all forms around one person. The great Dan Shafer, the founder of the Recombobulation area, now part of Civic Media, and proud to say he is our political editor as well. He joins us live via StreamYard from the aforementioned beautiful, fantastic city of Milwaukee. Dan, welcome back.
Good afternoon, Todd. What an introduction. It's always such a treat. Hearing that clip of Bobby Portis saying, "What about Milwaukee, man?" That always makes me smile. And always a treat to join you here on the Allbaugh Show.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time. To say there's a lot to recombobulate would be an understatement. You wrote a great piece. People can find it at civicmedia.us and also the Recombobulation area, which of course is a part of Civic Media. Make sure you subscribe to the Recombobulation area. Headline, 10 takeaways from the 2024 election in Wisconsin. I only wish we were not on terrestrial broadcast radio governed by the FCC. I'll clean it up for radio. Dan starts out by saying, well, crap.
went with a very concise 2-word lead there. For this particular column. We'll have many other words throughout it, but that's the start. It happened again. Donald Trump won again. The votes in Wisconsin were the ones, as they were counting, that put him over the top yet again. It's not great. No. Todd. But I think there's a lot we can learn from the results from last week, from how some of these shifts happened, where the trends exactly are, and I think kind of the first point that I made in these 10 takeaways was that Wisconsin nearly defied this national red wave election, because if you look at all 7 of the swing states, of course, were won by Donald Trump. The closest of those 7 happened to be Wisconsin, of course, right? We have to, for whatever reason, stay right as the closest, most evenly divided state in the nation, where Donald Trump won once again by less than a 1% margin. So now we can continue the statistic that I point to over and over again, which was before the election, 4 of the last 6 presidential elections decided by a less than 1% margin, and now 5 of the last 7 presidential elections in the state of Wisconsin decided by a less than 1% margin, the other 2 being the ones with Barack Obama on the ballot. So, as much as this was a big win for Trump across the nation, the Harris-Walz ticket did best in Wisconsin. And I think that is an important thing to recognize, even as there was like a Republican +6, I think, national shift from 2020 to 2024. In Wisconsin, it was only about a point. And so I think there are a variety of reasons for that. But I think it led to the kind of split ticket outcome that we saw with Donald Trump winning by a 0.86% margin and Tammy Baldwin also winning by a 0.86% margin. How Wisconsin is that exactly, right?
I mean, once again, we're back to Evers-Johnson voters. I mean, maybe not the same voters, but that same type of split ticket result. And I know that kind of like confounds a lot of people. I want to hop off your piece just for a second. I mean, it relates, but I was talking to a couple of people about this over the weekend, that 78% of K-12 public school referendums passed in the state on Tuesday. 78%, which means voters went and voted to raise their own taxes to support local public schools. I can't wait for the map that shows those districts and then an overlay of Trump voters. And you and I both know there's going to be a lot of people who went to the ballot box or the voting booths on Tuesday and voted both to raise their local property tax in support of public schools and voted for Donald Trump to end the U.S. Department of Public Education. And I find that fascinating. And to me, it's like, okay, how can we talk and listen to that voter and what was their thinking and what can we learn from this?
Yeah, that's such a great point, and I'd be interested to see, kind of how that maps out. I've been looking at, there's a map that my friend John Johnson from Marquette University did, mapping on where Tammy Baldwin did slightly better than the Harris Walz ticket in Wisconsin. A lot of Western Wisconsin, a lot of Fox Valley to a certain extent, Milwaukee even. She ran a point or two ahead of the Harris Walz ticket, and so I think that's going to be interesting. And the referendum piece. I think people, it's their voters are complicated, right? There's never any one line to draw from all of this. You might have a lot of, ideology can get fractured in a lot of places. People might be, like you said, voting to raise their own property taxes while voting for a president who has, like you said, promised to make a whole lot of change to education at the federal level. And so, kind of drilling down in some of this, Todd, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this piece of it too, given some of your background. But one of the places that swung most towards Trump in this election was in southwestern Wisconsin. 68 of 72 Wisconsin counties shifted to the right. Like I mentioned before, some of the places where those shifts, towards Harris were in the WOW counties. I think, as I mentioned in the piece, some of the Fox Valley and Green Bay places held serve in a lot of places. But in the southwest corner of the state, that is when you saw some of the biggest shifts from 2020 to 2024 in Trump's favor. So, I looked at Grant County, which was about a 6-point shift in a very corner of the state. And that's a county that voted for Barack Obama by double-digit margins both times he was on the ballot. And it was a county that voted a majority for Janet Protasewicz in the 2023 Wisconsin Supreme Court election, obviously not that long ago. So what do you make of that part of the state in particular shifting?
Boy, if I had all those answers, Dan, I'd be a wealthy man. I tell you, I'd be a top advisor, right? No, I appreciate the question. I mean, for those that might not know, I grew up there in southwest Wisconsin in Richland Center, halfway between Madison and La Crosse, and worked for Dale Schultz, of course, for a number of years, who was a state senator in that area, ran a lot of campaigns for the 3rd district, the 2nd district, which at various times have encompassed that part of the state. I don't know, again, that is any one answer. I would say a couple of things. In Grant County, you have a tremendously long-term, popular assembly incumbent, Travis Tranel, who grew up there and is very well liked. He ran very strongly against the Democratic candidate there. And I have to say I was really disappointed in some of the things I heard Travis say last week. One of his mentors is my former boss, Dale Schultz. And Dale was someone who worked very closely with people for, say, wind turbines in Montfort, Wisconsin, to bring down energy costs, solar farms. Dale was very pro alternative energy. And I heard Travis was attacking that last week, say, well, last thing we need is a bunch of windmills and acres of solar farms. That's the last thing we wanted to look at out here. That's completely antithetical to the conservation Republicans that people like Dale Schultz were. So I'm not sure if Travis has just gotten on the Trump train on this, if it was just, as they say, when the wolves howl, you better howl with them. I don't know that. But I also think that, again, trying to think about this in large terms, perhaps Democrats need to think about how they're talking about things. I'll point to myself first, not as a Democrat, but as an independent. I'm someone who, again, is pro-environment, I guess you would say, pro-alternative energy. One of the shows we're working on is to try to get folks from the what are we trying to say? We just talked about before, the Judas Priest, the Sandhill Almanac out there. What's the place out
Aldo
there?
Leopold.
Thank you. Oh,
That's what it was.
a mad cow moment. Sorry about that. The Aldo Leopold Foundation, and they're celebrating a big anniversary. And I think that we can talk without compromising what principles like people like you and I might have that are quote unquote pro-environment. You could talk about, that conservation and something that's done in a bipartisan fashion, the Lower Wisconsin Riverway. And that's messaging and things that, well, I like to canoe, I like to kayak, I like to hike, I like to hunt, without using the progressive talking points. We get to the same spot, but one of those messages is people get abrasive when they hear that in my part of the world, and the other one is more open. I don't know. That's just my thought.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track there for sure, and I think it is part of how we talk about these things too, right? And I think it is, it can be a bit of a messaging issue and a communication problem where it has to fit into a certain narrative, and I think that's what the Trump campaign has been successful with, not in their policies when Trump was president, but in the rhetoric and what they're trying to convey in a narrative sense about the political system being broken and wanting change. And I think this was in many ways a change election, and we saw that across the country. And people just were not buying what the Democrats were selling, even if there were a lot of underlying indicators that that there was some real success from the Biden administration over the last 4 years. But there is a disconnect there. And I think it's going to be important for Democrats to invest in this part of the state and figure out how they can kind of stop the bleeding here, because, as these shifts indicate, this isn't really slowing down anytime soon. So some of these, 10-point margins, 20-point margins that could be in Republicans' favor right now, those could move to 25, 30, 35-point margins if Democrats aren't careful. And I think what this election has partially showed is that there is still room to grow for Trump and for Republicans in rural parts of the state.
I think that's super cogent and perceptive. What do you think about this, Dan? That I know a lot of people on the left don't like to hear this, but I do think it's perception, right? You know this. Perception is reality. That's an old adage. And there is definitely a perception. Again, I'm not saying this is the reason, but there is a perception that the economy for the everyday mom and pop person is not doing well. And this is something I talked about in 2016 when I said, look, there are a lot of people out in my part of the state where I'm from that, they're not anti-gay or they're not anti-environment. But, in Madison, we talk about, well, we need a rapid transit system and a lot of, and none of that's necessarily wrong, right? Those are fine ideas and fine things to aspire to. But there has to be an understanding that in other parts of the state, that's just not their reality. They're just looking to have good roads and be able to put food on the table and go to work. And it's not that I'm not going to say there's nobody, because clearly people have, racist type of feelings, that type of thing. But I don't think that, what do you think? I don't think that everybody that voted for Trump is a racist, misogynist, terrible person. I just don't.
No, I agree with you. But I also have to, this is a place that Barack Obama was really successful in the state too. And I think part of his messaging that I think has to a certain extent gotten lost in the years since he was president is just talking, kind of approaching things as an outsider, approaching things as wanting to recognize that the political system that we have is broken and wanting to change that. And, to the extent that he was able to do that in the 8 years he was president, mixed results, I think, on a lot of fronts within that. And I think there is still going to be that appetite. And this is something that came up when I was reporting on the long extended feature story that I did in the Fox Valley, where there is going to be an appetite for somebody who is from outside the political system and is saying that, like, this is broken. We need to bring in we need to start doing things differently. And, to the extent that Donald Trump is the solution to those problems, we lived through 4 years of his presidency, and I don't think that he really delivered on a lot of those promises. But I think, again, it gets back to that rhetoric. It gets back to that narrative that he is selling, and that people are saying that there is this economy, this political system that does not work for me. And so I want something different.
Dan, can you stay around for one more segment? You got time for us?
Sure, absolutely.
All right. So I want to come back. I want to talk about a couple of things. One, you call it a light in the darkness, Tammy Baldwin winning. Maybe dig down that for a second. But also this take on, and I think this is incumbent upon me and even maybe regular listeners of the show, that there are a lot of people that just don't listen to the same media, and this rise of niche right-wing media that certainly, in my opinion, had some kind of an effect on this outcome. We'll come back, talk to our political editor, Dan Shafer. We will recombobulate further. I'm already feeling a little bit more tranquil anytime Dan's around. You come on back as well. It's the Todd Allbaugh Show on the Civic Media Radio Network. Welcome back to the Todd Allbaugh Show on the Civic Media Radio Network at 9 before the hour of 1 o'clock. Dan Shafer, Civic Media's political editor and founder of the Recombobulation area. is joining us live. Great article on the recombobulation area and at civicmedia.us by Dan over the weekend. 10 takeaways from the 2024 election in Wisconsin. Want to go quickly. Tom in Sauk County holding on the line. Tom, if you could be brief, but what do you got for us?
Hi. Well, my thought is that one thing is being missed, and it shouldn't be, is that the Democrats need to come to their senses and come to a middle point with the Republicans on abortion. And if they do that, I think they'll have a better chance of winning in the future, because if they keep on the way they are, the rural vote, and especially the Hispanic vote, I think that's one of the reasons they came out, is to show displeasure for, easy abortion is how the right sees it. And I think the left needs to come to a middle point and say, well, yes, we want to be pro-life and pro-adoption, and I think it'll make a real difference. I've not been hearing that, because when you watch Kamala's, things going on, that's one of the things she's talking about over and over is abortion. I don't think a lot of people are for it as much as what a lot of people would like to think.
Appreciate the call, Tom.
And that made a difference negative.
Appreciate it, Tom. Dan, quickly, your thoughts on that. It appears, although facts are figures still coming in, it appears that was not the driver to the extent that the Harris campaign and Democrats had hoped.
Yeah, I think so. But I think when you look at a lot of the, kind of state level politics, when this is going to referendum, when this is being decided at the state level, it's still very much siding on the pro-choice end of the spectrum when it comes to abortion rights. So I think that is, obviously there's a lot of nuance and complexity in this particular issue.
100%.
But I think, I do think, I think this issue probably Democrats had a stronger message on it at the end of the day. I think Republicans had a difficult one, and I think the part of the reason Trump is successful here is because he's just a constant moving target on this issue. When people can kind of assign wherever they want to be on the spectrum of this, whether it's appointing anti-abortion judges or having a little bit more social moderate type of policies that he kind of expresses in his own right.
I want to get this quickly. I think it's really important. And there's been a lot of talk over the weekend. It's taken some fire on social media platforms. We're getting some stuff on our YouTube page. It's coming particularly from Democrats that there's this theory, I'll call it a quasi-conspiracy theory, that the election was stolen. And people are going to myvote.wi.gov and saying that, well, my vote wasn't counted. I did that. My vote for the fall primary is counted. It says specifically on there, it's going to take 45 days to do this. I think we're in this Amazon mindset, right? That I ordered it this morning. It should be here by tonight or tomorrow morning, the latest. That's not how our election databases are set up. Right. And Dan, what are your thoughts on this? I don't think there's anything to it.
No, it's ridiculous to suggest that there was, some sort of problem with the vote count or anything like that. Look, Trump won this election. It's plain and simple. And I think, it's incumbent on all of us to respect the results. I hope the Senate, the Republican challenger in the Senate race will respect those results and concede his race.
Right. Eric Hovde has yet to concede.
But I think these conspiracies that are flying around on the left about Elon Musk or about any of this Starlink nonsense, it is complete nonsense and has nothing to do with the reality of the ground in Wisconsin.
I get it. I appreciate it only in the sense that I get people are so agonized and frustrated and confused. Like, how could this happen? You're stretching for any sort of explanation beyond he just won. Important. Here's the important point, Dan. You know this. In Wisconsin, none of our voting systems or machines are connected to the internet. You can't go in and wipe away stuff. It just is not a thing. Let's talk quickly about a couple of wins. One of those, Tammy Baldwin, and the other one in the state legislature.
Yeah, I think
for Democrats.
Yeah, I don't know how many times in the last week have you said to yourself, "Well, at least Tammy won," right? For me, it's quite a few. But yeah, she was. This was obviously the closest reelection campaign that she has had to mount again in a red wave year. But in almost all of Wisconsin's 20 biggest counties, Baldwin ran between 1 and 3 percentage points ahead of the Harris-Walz ticket. I think that is kind of, the political science nerds will tell you that incumbency advantage amounts to about a 2% advantage. So that was enough to carry her over the finish line. And ultimately, I really do think it is wonderful that despite a red wave election, that Tammy Baldwin still won. I think she is a terrific public servant. I think we are lucky to have her representing Wisconsin for another 6 years. And I think there is something to be learned from why she is able to be successful in more rural areas and does better than other Democrats in rural areas of Wisconsin.
Yeah, I mean, she gets the job done. Great constituent services, and we've talked to the show before why she connects. About a minute left. I'll let you go wherever you want.
Yeah, you mentioned the state Senate. The state Senate is a real bright spot for Democrats in this election. There were 4 races that were kind of in the close and toss-up territory, and Democrats won all 4. And so by winning all 4 of those races, they have put themselves in position to have an opportunity to compete for the state Senate majority in 2026. So they job well done, a real bright spot amid a frustrating night in Wisconsin. But state Senate Democrats, democracy is built from the ground up, and it is these type of successes that can really change things in the long term. And so the win by Jody Haber-Sinekin beating Dewey Strobel in particular really stands out as is probably the biggest win of the night for Democrats in the state legislature.
Very quickly, you're reporting Robin Vos stays speaker under Republican control or no?
I think he probably does. Yeah, I think he probably does. I think he
Robin.
survives.
That means we'll have more episodes of What's Poppin' with Robin Vos. That'll be fantastic.
There you go.
Dan Shafer, you're amazing. We appreciate your time, appreciate your thoughtfulness. Great article at the Recombobulation area and at civicmedia.us on the 10 takeaways from this election. Dan, thank you so very much.
Thanks, Todd. Be well.